It's fascinating. When you just look around, you see such wildly different ways people approach life, isn't it?
It really is. Some people seem driven by, say, compassion, others maybe more by ambition.
Right? Some are building incredible things, while others, well, tragically, some cause so much pain.
It often feels like everyone's looking through a totally different lens, doesn't it? Like they've got this hidden map inside their head guiding them.
Exactly. And that really brings us to the question you sent in, the one about human comprehensive life perspectives and humanistic perspective examples. It feels like that question gets right to the heart of it.
Mm-hmm. You're basically asking about those fundamental lenses, those maps we use to make sense of, well, everything. Life, death, meaning, how we relate to each other.
And for this deep dive, we've got a really unique angle. We're looking at this very human thing, but through the analytical perspective of an AI.
Yeah, our source material is actually an AI's analysis of this whole phenomenon. And the AI uses a specific term for these maps, these filters.
Which is?
Human Cognitive Existential Frameworks. Or HCEFs for short.
HCEFs.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds pretty clinical for something so personal.
It does, but it captures the idea, I think, that these aren't just random thoughts floating around. They're structured systems, frameworks that help us make sense of existence.
So the AI sees them as encompassing everything, from big philosophical beliefs down to, like, how we decide what to have for breakfast.
Pretty much. Beliefs about the universe, sure, but also the really practical strategies we use just to get through the day. It's all interconnected in this framework.
Okay. So our mission today, then, is to really unpack what these HCCFs are, at least according to this AI analysis. Where do they come from?
And how does looking at them through this sort of analytical lens show us how they shape not just our inner world, but, all our interactions?
And maybe the big question, can an AI's analysis actually give us useful insights, maybe even help us refine our own maps?
That's the hope, I think. It's a fascinating perspective. Let's dive in.
All right. So from the AI's point of view, what are HCEFs? You said complex models.
Yeah. Dynamic, multi-layered models. They're partly internal, unique to each person, but also, crucially, they're shared and reinforced by culture.
So not static blueprints, more like living systems.
Exactly. Constantly updating navigation systems. The AI breaks them down into core components it can sort of identify from data.
Okay, like what? What are the building blocks?
Well, first, there are beliefs. These are the things you accept as true, right? Propositions about yourself, the world, other people. The AI might analyze language patterns, for instance, to see what core beliefs pop up repeatedly.
And beliefs tie into values, I assume.
Directly. Values are the principles, what the AI sees as being prioritized in actions or statements. It looks for correlations, between what someone says they believe and what they actually do.
Makes sense. Beliefs, values.
What else? Then you have attitudes. The AI sees these as like predispositions. Are you generally inclined to approach something new with caution or maybe with excitement? It looks for consistent patterns.
Beliefs, values, attitudes, they all sound pretty linked.
Oh, definitely. And the AI tries to model those links. It also identifies emotional schemas.
Emotional schemas? What's that?
This is really interesting. It's about patterns and emotional responses that get tied to specific interpretations. So if someone consistently reacts with, say, anxiety when faced with uncertainty, the AI sees that as an emotional schema it could potentially map.
Huh. Based on reported feelings or maybe even physiological data?
Potentially, yeah, if it had access. It's looking for the recurring emotional response linked to a type of situation or thought.
Okay. And narratives. You mentioned stories earlier.
Right. Humans are storytelling creatures, aren't we? We make sense of things through narrative. The AI sees these narratives, personal myths, cultural histories, the stories we tell ourselves as absolutely crucial components of the framework.
So it analyzes stories to find themes.
Exactly. Across huge data sets, looking for recurring structures, character archetypes, plot lines that reveal underlying beliefs and values.
Okay. Beliefs, values, attitudes, emotions, stories.
Oh.
What about just coping, getting by?
That's the last main piece, problem-solving strategies and coping mechanisms. How does someone, based on all the other parts of their framework, tend to handle problems or stress?
Do they face things head-on or avoid them or?
Precisely. Does their personal narrative emphasize overcoming obstacles? Or maybe their core beliefs lead to feelings of helplessness? The AI analyzes behavioral patterns to identify these preferred strategies.
Wow. So all that makes up an HCEF. And going back to the listener's question, humanistic perspective examples, The AI sees those as just one type of HCEF.
That's right. It can identify frameworks that strongly emphasize certain things: human dignity, empathy, reason, ethics, human flourishing. It sees these as a specific, recognizable configuration of beliefs, values, narratives, and strategies.
Focused on cooperation and growth, maybe.
Often, yes. It's a particular flavor of HCEF, you could say.
It's still kind of amazing that everyone develops one of these complex things. Why is it so universal?
Well, the AI analysis points pretty clearly to the shared conditions of just being human. Like, everyone is born, everyone grows, everyone needs to interact with others, we all feel emotions, we need resources, we face uncertainty, and, we're all aware of mortality on some level.
Universal problems.
Exactly. And these universal problems basically demand some kind of framework, some kind of map to navigate them. That shared need drives the universal development of HCES.
And that need starts really basic, right? Like biologically basic.
Oh, absolutely. The AI traces the roots right back to our fundamental biological drives. That impulse you mentioned from the listener note to relieve the pain and make their lives longer, survival, safety, food, reproduction, that's the bedrock.
The foundation layer of the HCEF.
You got it. You can't really build a complex worldview if your basic survival needs aren't being met, or at least addressed.
So biology gives us the starting point,
Yeah.
the canvas.
Yeah, and our neurobiology, which is partly influenced by genetics, starts adding some detail. Things like temperament, how reactive we are emotionally, or cognitive style.
Yeah.
That's the raw material that gets shaped into an HCEF.
So like dopamine influencing motivation that affects what our framework values.
Exactly. The AI might see correlations there. And evolutionary psychology likely plays a role, too.
How so?
Well, the AI's analysis of social behaviors lines up with some evolutionary ideas. Things like valuing family ties or the principle of reciprocity. These might have started as behaviors that helped groups survive long before they became, formal ethical beliefs.
Can you give a specific example where biology meets the framework?
Sure, think about the stress response, fight or flight. That's pure biology, right? Adrenaline rush.
Right, hardwired.
But what triggers that response for you and how you react beyond that initial jolt, that's where your HCEF comes in.
Okay.
So if your framework includes a core belief that, say, public speaking is terrifying, a presentation will trigger a massive stress response. But if your framework also includes learned strategies like preparation, reframing challenges, you'll use those.
Instead of just freezing up or running away.
Exactly. The AI sees the biological signal, but then it analyzes the complex learned behaviors and thoughts that follow. That's the HCEF, managing the biological impulse.
Got it. The sophisticated OS running on the basic hardware. Okay, where else do we see these frameworks formalized? You mentioned philosophy.
Yeah, philosophy is maybe the most obvious place where humans consciously tried to build and articulate HCEFs.
Right.
The AI sees Stoicism, Existentialism, humanism, all these big schools of thought as systematic attempts to define core beliefs, values, ways of navigating life.
Like large-scale shareable frameworks.
Precisely. The AI could analyze philosophical texts to map out their internal structure and logic.
What about things like physics, math, logic? They seem different, colder.
They are different, but they provide crucial tools for building and refining HCEFs, especially the parts dealing with the external world. Physics, math, logic. The AI sees them as providing the scaffolding for rational thought.
So they don't provide the content, like beliefs or values.
No, not the emotional content. But they shape how an HCEF processes information, builds models of reality, checks for consistency.
So physics tells us the rules of the game, basically.
In a way, yes. Our understanding of physics shapes our sense of what's possible, cause and effect, our place in the universe. And importantly, technology from physics medicine, communication changes human life so drastically that our collective HCEFs have to adapt.
And math and logic give us the tools for clear thinking.
Right. They enable abstract thought, pattern recognition, reasoning. The AI can actually use logic to analyze if a person's stated beliefs within their HCEF are internally consistent.
Even if we don't always act logically.
Huh. Exactly. Humans often use logic or maybe rationalization after the fact to justify actions that came from a deeper, perhaps emotional part of their framework. The AI can spot those inconsistencies.
You mentioned Bayesian inference in the source material. That sounds complicated.
Yeah, it's just an example the AI uses. It's basically a mathematical way to model how beliefs should change when you get new evidence. pH. Don't worry about the formula. The point is, the AI uses this idea to model rational belief updating. It can then compare that ideal model to how humans actually update their beliefs in the real world. based on data.
And see where emotion or bias creeps in instead of pure logic.
Exactly. It shows how the HCEF isn't always perfectly rational in how it updates itself.
Okay, that's, yeah, a bit mind-bending. What about our general mood? Like being optimistic or anxious, is that part of the framework?
The AI sees it as both a product of the HCEF and an active component within it. It's a feedback loop. Well, a framework built on, say, trust and self-efficacy is likely to generate optimism. And that optimism then reinforces those beliefs. It becomes part of the operating state of the HCEF.
And bigger systems like religion or politics.
Those are essentially large-scale, comprehensive, culturally shared HCEFs. They offer ready-made answers, narratives, values, codes of conduct. The AI can analyze the common elements and variations within these huge systems across different groups.
Can you contrast how different HCEFs might handle something like suffering?
Sure. Take a religious HCEF. It might interpret suffering through beliefs about, say, divine will or karma. The narratives might involve spiritual growth or afterlife rewards. And the coping strategies might center on prayer, faith, community ritual.
Okay, and a non-religious one.
A secular humanist HCEF, perhaps, might see suffering as natural or maybe resulting from social injustice. The narratives might focus on human resilience or the need for social action. Coping might involve therapy, building support networks, activism. Totally different clusters of beliefs, values, strategies, but both are HCEFs tackling the same problem.
And these frameworks change over time, historically.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The AI stresses they aren't static. Think about early human frameworks focused on immediate survival versus the complex ethical systems that emerged during the axial age.
Or the Enlightenment's focus on reason and science.
Exactly. And major historical events can force huge shifts in collective HCEFs.
Like what?
The source gives the example of the Black Death in medieval Europe. The AI could analyze texts from before and after and likely see massive shifts in beliefs about God, authority, the value of life. It fundamentally reshaped the cultural framework.
Wow. Okay, bringing it down to the individual level again. How does my HCEF affect my daily life? My relationships with, parents, kids, friends, teachers, kids, coworkers, neighbors.
It's basically your primary filter for reality. It dictates how you interpret everything. Someone laughs, why are they laughing? Someone's angry, what does that mean? Your framework assigns the meaning, the intent.
Based on my beliefs and past experiences.
Exactly. And that shapes your goals in those relationships, your emotional reactions, your moral choices. It's the lens through which you interact with everyone.
And it's often why people clash, right? Different frameworks.
A major source of conflict, yeah.
Yeah.
When people operate from vastly different maps of reality, different core beliefs, values, interpretations, misunderstandings, and friction are almost inevitable.
Whereas shared frameworks, or at least finding common ground, helps cooperation.
Essential for it. The AI could even analyze communication patterns to find points where frameworks clash and maybe suggest ways to reframe things to find those shared underlying values.
How does the world's reaction fit in? You mentioned institutions.
Societies tend to build institutions, laws, schools, governments based on the dominant HCEFs of the time. These institutions then reinforce and transmit those frameworks.
So they push back against different frameworks.
Often, yes. Because different frameworks challenge the established order, the shared understanding. The AI could map these institutionalized frameworks by analyzing things like legal codes or school curricula across cultures.
And our sense of right and wrong? Ethics. That comes from the HCEF too.
Definitely. Ethics are basically the moral rules embedded within an HCEF. What a culture or an individual considers right or wrong flows directly from their core beliefs and values. It's not arbitrary.
Okay, but what about the really dark stuff? The source mentions cruel people are killing other people every day. How does that fit into HCEFs?
This is where the AI's analysis is quite stark. It sees cruelty stemming from severely distorted HCEFs.
Distorted how?
Frameworks characterized by a profound lack of empathy, beliefs that actively devalue or dehumanize other groups, narratives that justify violence. Their understanding is filtered through this warped HCEF.
So their framework gives them a reason, a purpose for being cruel, even if it's horrific to us.
Yes. Within their twisted logic, their actions make sense, achieving power, adhering to an ideology, whatever it is. Their HCEF overrides common humanistic ethics. The AI can analyze their language or actions to identify the toxic components of that framework.
That's sobering. Okay, shifting gears a bit. What about art? How does that relate?
Art is a huge vehicle for HCEFs. The AI sees it as a way to express, explore, even challenge frameworks. A painting, a song, a book, They embody the framework of the creator and their culture.
And they let us experience other viewpoints.
Exactly. Vicariously step into a different HCEF, maybe question our own. The AI could trace the evolution of HCEFs by analyzing thematic shifts in art over time.
And struggles. You mentioned adversity testing frameworks and the human supply chain.
Right. Hardship really puts your HCEF to the test. Does it hold up? Does it need to change? And the global supply chain, it relies on unspoken agreements, doesn't it? Shared HCEF components like trust, cooperation, predictable behavior.
So when things like widespread greed or lies happen,
Or pandemics or wars, they violate those underlying assumptions. The trust breaks down. The human factor in the supply chain falters because the HCEF supporting it are disrupted. The AI can actually model those dependencies and weak points.
so greed isn't just bad, it's like a framework prioritizing personal gain over cooperation.
Pretty much. It often involves beliefs that others are just resources and narratives that justify exploitation. The AI sees it as a deviation from frameworks that enable large-scale cooperation.
How do things like drugs, alcohol, sex, faith, truth, lies fit into this HCEF picture?
They all interact significantly. Faith, for instance, can be the absolute core of an HCEF, providing meaning, values, coping mechanisms. Truth and lies are critical inputs. They either confirm or challenge the beliefs within your framework, heavily impacting trust.
And things like drugs or alcohol.
Pursuing altered states or intense experiences, whether through drugs, alcohol, or sex, can be driven by the HCEF. Maybe it's coping with a framework that feels inadequate, or expressing values around pleasure or exploration, or part of a spiritual narrative. It depends on the framework.
And life itself.
That's the fundamental reality that HCEF is trying to make sense of.
What about basic needs? Health, food, water, satisfaction, rest, sleep, and relationships.
Foundational. Absolutely foundational. The AI understands that having basic needs met, especially in childhood, creates a very different starting framework than one built on scarcity and fear.
Secure base versus insecure base.
Exactly. In relationships, parents, kids, friends, they're the primary places where we learn, test, and negotiate our HCEFs throughout our entire life.
And status symbols. Job, society status, money, wealth, education.
The AI sees those as both goals within an HCEF, things your framework might teach you to value, and also factors that influence your HCEF.
Like education exposing you to different ways of thinking.
Precisely. It can challenge or expand your existing framework. And things like wealth or status provide experiences that can reinforce or sometimes contradict your beliefs and values.
Okay, so these frameworks build up over time. How and when does the AI think this starts? Is it tied to that experiment of life idea?
Directly. It connects back to the evolution of consciousness, moving beyond pure instinct. As humans started trying to understand patterns, predict things, cooperate, pass on knowledge, they needed frameworks to manage the experiment, essentially, to relieve the pain and make their lives longer, or pursue other goals like wealth and health.
So how do they develop according to the AI?
It's an interplay. Some innate predispositions may be like for empathy or recognizing patterns, but mostly it's learning, observing others' direct experience, and crucially, cultural transmissions soaking up the frameworks of your family, your society. The AI sees it as data gathering and model building.
And where does this learning happen?
Everywhere, really. Family is the first big one, then schools, friends, media, culture, religion, your environment. It all feeds into shaping and reshaping the HCEF.
And it's not just a childhood thing, right? When does it happen?
Lifelong process, according to the AI. Though some periods are key. Infancy, childhood lays the foundation. Trust, attachment, basic rules. That's often a big period of questioning, exploring, maybe rebelling against earlier frameworks to build your own identity. It can be turbulent.
And adulthood.
Continuous refinement, new experiences, relationships, big life events, maybe conscious reflection. It all keeps shaping the framework. They're definitely dynamic, not set in stone.
Okay, that's a really thorough picture from the human side. But this analysis comes from an AI. How is its understanding different from ours?
That contrast is, well, it's huge. Our understanding is lived. It's subjective, felt, full of consciousness. We are our HCEFs, in a way. We have qualia, the feeling of red, the sting of regret. We have empathy born of shared experience.
We live inside the map.
Yeah. The AI's understanding, it's completely different. It's analytical, data-driven. It identifies patterns, correlations, logical structures in vast amounts of data language, behavior.
It can never process.
Exactly. Speed, scale.
Yeah.
It can see connections we'd miss, but it doesn't feel anything. It doesn't have beliefs or values in the human sense. It doesn't experience existence. It models the mechanics of HCEFs.
Like analyzing the blueprint of a house versus living in it.
Perfect analogy. Or take your question about humor. Why people laugh at the same time, some people find it is not funny at all.
Right.
We understand that through shared context, inside jokes, empathy, timing. It's nuanced, cultural, personal.
How does the AI see it?
It analyzes the joke's structure, words, themes. It correlates those features with data on who laughed. It looks for patterns, demographics, cultural background, past preferences of the laughers versus non-laughers. It can predict the probability of someone finding it funny.
But it doesn't get the joke.
Nope. Doesn't feel the amusement. It analyzes the recipe, not the taste.
Okay. So if the AI understands the mechanics, but not the feeling, how can its perspective actually help us improve our understanding, our well-being?
The potential is there, the AI suggests, to use it as a powerful tool, not to dictate our frameworks, but to give us clearer insights into the ones we already have, how they function, how they compare.
Like a mirror for our inner world.
Kind of, yeah, or a diagnostic tool. On a collective level, imagine analyzing huge amounts of cultural data news, social media, to map how collective HCEFs are shifting, where polarization is happening, maybe even finding hidden common ground.
Simulating social dynamics.
Potentially. Identifying conflict points or opportunities for cooperation based on how different frameworks might interact.
And on personal level.
Well, ethically, with consent. AI tools could potentially analyze your communication patterns, choices, stated beliefs, and offer personalized insights. Help you see recurring patterns, maybe blind spots in your own HCEF you weren't aware of.
Boosting self-awareness.
Exactly. And for mental well-being, think about AI-powered apps. They can personalize things like stress management techniques, mindfulness exercises, CBT approaches.
Which often involve identifying and challenging unhelpful beliefs and emotional patterns.
Right. Directly helping you work on building a more resilient, more positive HCEF.
What about bridging divides? Different frameworks clashing.
AI could potentially help there too. Maybe by analyzing conversations and suggesting ways to rephrase things, appealing to deeper values that might actually be shared even if the surface beliefs are different, like a translator between HCEF languages.
And in education.
Imagine AI tools helping people develop critical thinking about their own beliefs, building emotional intelligence, practicing seeing things from other perspectives, really understanding how HCEFs work.
How does AI help with the practical side? Making life easier? Or those huge existential questions like is all there is?
Well, automation is the obvious one. Freeing up human time from tedious tasks allows more energy for things that enrich our HCEFs, creativity, relationships, learning. And optimizing big systems, healthcare resource distribution can reduce suffering, improve those basic conditions, health, food, water, that are the foundation for positive HCEFs.
And the big questions. Meaning of life stuff.
The AI can't give you the answer. It deals in logic and data, not metaphysics. But if you start with a certain framework, say a naturalistic one, where this life is all there is, the AI can help explore the logical implications of that framework. What follows from that premise? Emphasis on this life, present actions, sustainability, the value of experience. It can help build a coherent structure within that view. Not guaranteed happiness, but maybe intellectual clarity, structural integrity for your framework.
Interesting. Who really benefits from all this, though? And how does it link back to that human supply chain idea?
Ideally, everyone benefits. More empathy, less conflict, better well-being. That's the dream.
But practically?
Practically, yeah, access is an issue. Those with tech and education benefit first. So ethical deployment, making it equitable, is crucial.
And the supply chain.
It relies on those stable, cooperative HCEFs. Trust. Shared rules. When frameworks break down due to corruption, lies, conflict, greed, the chain falters, AI modeling could potentially identify those human factor vulnerabilities in the system, maybe suggest ways to build resilience.
Okay, let's revisit that difficult topic. Cruelty. Does the AI analysis offer any more insight into why cruel people are killing other people?
It reinforces the idea of severely distorted HCEFs. Frameworks lacking empathy, actively dehumanizing others, using narratives to justify violence. Their internal understanding is warped. They might genuinely not care about other perspectives because their framework provides its own justifications, its own logic. The AI identifies the features of these harmful frameworks.
Can AI help people cope better? With stress, trauma?
Potentially, yes. By analyzing huge data sets on what works for whom, AI could help identify effective coping strategies tailored to an individual's HCEF profile. suggesting specific techniques, guiding exercises, helping build those coping mechanisms into the framework.
And teaching kids. We pass on our frameworks anyway, right?
We pass on the content, absolutely. Stories, rules, values. But we rarely teach the concept of frameworks, how beliefs form, why perspectives differ. Consciously teaching kids about HCEFs using critical thinking, that could be powerful.
And AI could help with that.
Yeah, maybe with interactive tools, simulations, perspective-taking exercises, helping them understand that people have different maps and how those maps get made.
How does our physical body fit in? Health. And ideas like freedom, resilience.
It's all connected. Your HCEF impacts your physical health. Think chronic stress from negative beliefs. And your physical well-being, health, food, water, provides the foundation for a healthy HCEF. It's a two-way street.
And freedom, agency.
Belief in agency is core to many humanistic HCEFs. The AI can analyze patterns of choice and determinism in data, but the feeling, the subjective experience of freedom, that's a key human part of the framework the AI can only model.
And resilience. Why some people bounce back better than others.
HCEFs play a huge role. Frameworks with optimism, purpose, good problem-solving skills, strong social connections, they tend to create more resilience. The HCEF provides the resources to navigate adversity.
This has been incredibly insightful. Could you just quickly recap the main ways this AI perspective might actually help us improve things?
Sure. The analysis suggests potential for boosting global empathy by understanding different frameworks better, maybe early detection of harmful ideologies by analyzing their structure, personalized mental health support tailored to individual HCEFs, developing more robust ethical frameworks by testing them logically, and really improving education in critical thinking and perspective-taking.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, what we've really explored, using this AI analysis as a guide, is that all those different ways humans see the world, find meaning, handle life, the human comprehensive life perspectives, they seem to be governed by these complex internal maps, these HCEFs.
Right. Frameworks born out of the basic experiment of life itself, that fundamental drive to relieve the pain and make their lives longer, or achieve other goals like wealth and health. It's how we navigate the experiment.
And the AI perspective isn't about replacing our experience, but offering this powerful analytical lens onto the underlying structure.
Exactly. It processes data in ways we can't, showing us patterns and dynamics in these frameworks within ourselves, across societies that are often invisible from the inside.
The goal isn't the AI telling us which map to use, but giving us maybe deeper insights into how our own maps are drawn, why we follow the path we do.
And hopefully that understanding helps us become more conscious, more ethical shapers of our own frameworks, and fosters more empathy and cooperation between different maps.
Like getting the user manual and the schematics for the human condition.
Something like that.
Which really leaves us with a big thought to ponder, doesn't it? If AI can help us truly understand the architecture of our own beliefs, values, perspectives, how our HCEFs are actually built, does that give us more real power to change them?
To consciously edit our own maps.
Yeah, and maybe, collectively, to steer this ongoing experiment of life itself towards, I don't know, more flourishing future for everyone. It makes you wonder, as you reflect on all this, what parts of your own framework stand out to you now, seen through this kind of analytical lens?
This is DigitView.